Imagine you've got the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, right? And they walk into this crucial, high-stakes board meeting.
Right, the kind of meeting where careers are made or broken.
Exactly. But instead of taking the seat at the head of that massive mahogany table, they ignore the chair entirely. They grab a rag, drop to their knees, and just start shining the shoes of the junior interns in the room.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds, I mean, it sounds completely absurd.
Totally absurd. It sounds like a fantastic way to, lose the respect of the board and probably get fired by the end of the day.
Oh, without a doubt.
But according to the manuscript we're taking a deep dive into today, that exact inversion of power is actually the single most effective leadership strategy in human history.
Yeah, and the text we're looking at is this really in-depth manuscript called Leading Through Service. And it unpacks this radically counterintuitive leadership revolution.
Right, a revolution that was modeled by Jesus Christ.
Exactly. It's a model that takes the traditional organizational chart, the one where all the power consolidates at the very top, and it just completely flips it upside down.
Which is our mission today, really, to explore not just the what of this servant leadership model, but the why.
Yeah, the why is so crucial here. We really need to understand the underlying mechanics of why an approach that prioritizes humility and, profound sacrifice and deep relational care over sheer efficiency metrics, why that is the actual key to lasting transformation.
Okay, let's unpack this because the central tension of this text really starts with this massive culture clash.
Oh, absolutely. A huge clash.
We all know the first century Roman world was built on a really rigid patron-client system. I mean, it was an environment just steeped in coercive authority. Power strictly flowed downward.
Right, from the top down. Emperors, governors, military commanders, they ruled through dominance.
Yeah, and your social status was entirely tied to public recognition, right? Like the debts other people owed you. And the disciples of Jesus were completely steeped in that cultural water.
They didn't know anything else. So when Jesus started talking about, establishing a kingdom, they naturally just projected that Roman hierarchical structure right onto it.
Right, they started jockeying for the prominent seats.
They were basically looking for the exact same power, just with different titles. And the text highlights this moment in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, where the disciples are actually caught arguing among themselves.
Arguing about who gets to be the greatest, right?
Exactly. Who's going to be the greatest in this new administration? And Jesus responds with a statement that just completely shatters their worldview. He tells them, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant.
Wow.
And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all.
Slave of all. And we read that now and it sounds like a nice poetic piece of religious phrasing. But in that context...
It was intensely disruptive language.
Yeah. It was deliberately shocking.
Highly deliberate. If we look at the sociology of the first century world, a slave occupied the absolute lowest tier of human existence.
They had zero social status.
Zero. No legal rights, no agency, and absolutely no public honor. So by taking that specific socially degrading image and elevating it as the highest possible calling in God's kingdom, the manuscript points out that Jesus was completely dismantling their framework of influence.
He was establishing a totally new metric. Greatness isn't achieved by, rising above others and accumulating dependence.
Right.
Greatness is revealed by actively lowering yourself for the sake of others. I always picture worldly leadership like climbing a corporate ladder.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Thanks. Yeah, the unwritten rule of the ladder is pretty simple. The higher you climb, the more people are stationed below you, supporting your weight, doing the heavy lifting.
Essentially serving your vision.
Exactly. But in the model the manuscript describes, the ladder goes downward. To increase your influence, you have to descend. You aren't great because people serve you. You are great because of the depth to which you serve them.
And the text makes a real point to emphasize that Jesus didn't just, deliver a theoretical TED Talk on this downward trajectory.
Right. He didn't just hand out a syllabus.
No, he provided a living parable that forced his followers to actually confront the reality of it.
Which brings us to that incredibly visceral scene from the Gospel of John, set in the upper room.
Yeah, chapter 13.
If you read the text, the psychological friction in that room must have been just suffocating. I mean, think about it. You have the dusty roads of first century Judea. Everyone is wearing open sandals.
So by the time they arrive for the Passover meal, their feet are just absolutely filthy.
Covered in muck. And custom dictated that the lowest household slave was supposed to wash the guests' feet at the door. It was grimy, undesirable work.
But there is no slave present in this rented room.
Right. So the disciples just sit there. The text really implies this heavy, awkward silence where everyone is stubbornly refusing to lower themselves to do the job.
Nobody wants to be the one to blink.
Exactly. And then the master stands up. He takes off his outer garment, wraps a towel around his waist, pours water into a basin, and just kneels down in front of them.
The teacher assumes the posture of the lowest slave. It's an unimaginable reversal of roles that completely paralyzes the room.
Yeah, Peter even tries to stop him, right? Because the cognitive dissonance is just too much to handle.
Right, Peter's like, "You are never washing my feet." But what's fascinating here...
Wait, can I push back on this for a second?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Because I totally get the theology of the foot washing, but let's be real about the practical application today. If a modern CEO or a senior director spends their day, like, vacuuming the break room or making coffee for the interns, the board is going to question their competence.
Oh, absolutely. They'd think they were wasting company time.
Right. It looks weak. So how does the manuscript reconcile this deeply menial service with maintaining actual organizational authority? Doesn't doing the grunt work undermine a leader's ability to command respect when it actually matters?
That is the natural human assumption, right?
Yeah.
That the authority has to be fiercely protected through distance and status symbols.
Yeah, the corner office, the executive parking spot.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is that the manuscript explains the mechanism behind the foot washing. It reveals it wasn't just a chore. It was a profound theological statement of secure identity.
Secure identity. Okay, say more about that.
Well, the text notes that Jesus knew exactly who he was, where he came from, and where he was going. When a leader operates from a place of completely secure identity, no act of service is beneath them.
Because their worth isn't tied to their task.
Bingo. The text argues that serving others is actually dignifying, not demeaning. True authority doesn't flow from a title you aggressively defend. It flows from self-giving love that naturally commands allegiance.
So by kneeling, he was actually demonstrating this untouchable strength. It's like the ultimate flex in a way. He is so secure in his supreme authority that he can do the lowest job without losing an ounce of status.
And if we follow the manuscript's logic, that scene with the towel and the basin was really just a localized preview of the ultimate expression of this leadership model.
Which is the cross.
Right, the cross. The crucifixion demonstrates that true leadership in this framework is entirely sacrificial. It means stepping right into the firing line.
Bearing the burdens of others.
Yeah, bearing the failures and the pain of your people at an incredibly high personal cost. It frames authority not as a tool for extraction, but as a vehicle for total self-giving.
That is a heavy, beautiful realization. But it also creates a massive pivot point for the manuscript, I think. Because translating that first century upper room reality into a modern context is incredibly difficult.
Oh, it's so hard.
If you are running a nonprofit or leading a ministry or managing a corporate team today, you are facing immense constant pressure to grow. You have quarterly metrics to hit, budgets to balance.
Performance reviews to pass. Yeah, the pressure for quantifiable success creates a very real tension, and the text explicitly warns about this.
What does it say?
It points out that in modern organizational environments, it is dangerously easy for leadership to quietly drift into mere management.
Oh, wow. Mere management.
Right. Leaders stop being cultivators of people, and they just morph into administrators of programs.
That makes me think of the difference between running a factory and tending a garden.
Ooh, I like that. Unpack that a bit.
Well, in a factory, managerial leadership makes perfect sense. You're obsessed with efficiency. If a machine is running slow, you apply force. You swap a part, you optimize the assembly line, you track the output on a spreadsheet.
Right, it's all about output.
Exactly. But the manuscript describes godly leadership, this servant leadership, as tending a garden. And the mechanisms are totally different. You can't yell at a seed to grow faster.
No, you definitely can't.
You can't pull on the leaves of a wilting plant to force it upward. You'll just snap it. You have to diagnose the environment. Is the soil toxic? Is there lack of sunlight? You cultivate, you pull weeds, you provide water.
The text makes a crucial distinction right there. Managerial leadership organizes activity, while servant leadership cultivates transformation.
Organizes activity versus cultivates transformation. That is huge.
Yeah, because you can have a perfectly organized factory that looks incredibly successful on paper, producing massive amounts of activity, but generating absolutely no spiritual or personal growth in the people involved.
People do not grow simply because they're managed efficiently.
Exactly. The manuscript argues they grow because they are known, loved, guided, and served by a leader who is deeply invested in their personal flourishing.
So if you're listening and looking at your own team right now, it's really worth asking yourself, are you just tracking their output on a spreadsheet, or are you actually cultivating their growth? Are you diagnosing the soil of their work environment, or are you just demanding more widgets?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
But this raises a very practical issue that the manuscript anticipates.
Okay, what's that?
If a leader isn't supposed to just sit in an office managing programs and obsessing over daily efficiency metrics, what exactly are they doing with their time?
Right. If we take away the administrative spreadsheet, what fills the vacuum?
And the text provides a very clear, definitive answer to that. Multiplication.
Multiplication.
Yeah. The day-to-day job of a servant leader is the intentional multiplication of other leaders through deep life-on-life mentorship.
And the manuscript highlights the apostolic model of the early church to prove this, doesn't it?
It does. The early church didn't explode across the Roman Empire because one incredibly gifted person tried to do everything from a centralized stage. It grew because they aggressively distributed responsibility.
Look at the Apostle Paul. He wasn't some lone wolf operating in a silo. The text points to his relationship with Timothy as kind of the gold standard.
Right, 2 Timothy.
Yeah, Paul didn't just hand Timothy a corporate training manual or a list of tasks. He poured his life into Timothy's character, his courage, his spiritual maturity.
Or you look at the administrative nightmare in Acts chapter 6.
Oh, the food distribution.
Exactly. The apostles are entirely overwhelmed with the daily logistical distribution of food to the widows. People are being neglected. So what do the apostles do?
They don't just work harder.
No, they recognize their limits and appoint deacons to handle that vital practical work, which then frees the apostles to maintain their core focus on prayer and teaching.
But I know exactly what a lot of managers and leaders are thinking when they hear that. Let's just be honest. Isn't it usually faster and way more efficient to just do the job yourself rather than taking the time to train an amateur?
Oh, everybody has felt that.
Right. We've all used the excuse, it'll take me 5 minutes to just fix this, but it will take me 2 hours to explain it to my junior team member.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the manuscript confronts that exact mindset. It explains that efficiency is fundamentally a managerial metric, not a kingdom metric.
Wow, okay.
If your only goal is completing a task quickly, then yes, doing it yourself is the right move. But the true measure of a servant leader, according to this text, is not followers gained or tasks completed flawlessly.
It's leaders raised.
Exactly. The true measure is leaders raised.
Because when you do everything yourself, because you are, the most competent person in the room, you unwittingly become the primary bottleneck for your organization's growth.
You cap your own potential.
Yeah.
And the manuscript offers a specific mechanism for how this multiplication actually happens. It describes small groups, devotional gatherings, and delegated projects as laboratories for leadership.
Laboratories. I love that word for this. Because a laboratory is a controlled environment designed for experimentation.
Right. And in a small group setting, the stakes are relatively low. If a young, emerging leader facilitates a discussion and just completely fumbles it, it's a safe failure.
They get immediate, gentle feedback from a mentor.
Exactly. You cannot simulate that kind of safe failure in front of a massive audience or during a high-stakes corporate launch.
No way.
By investing the inefficient, messy time required to let people practice and fail in these laboratories, a servant leader creates a reproductive cycle that scales the mission across entire generations.
It's the ultimate long game. You are building an engine of multiplication rather than just a monument to your own competence.
That's a great way to put it.
But, we also have to be honest about the dark side of this. Because the manuscript doesn't paint this as a sunny, easy stroll through the park.
Not at all.
It is very clear that this ideal is incredibly difficult to maintain because leadership is a spiritual battlefield. And there are severe hazards that come with the territory.
The text actually outlines 3 specific temptations that constantly threaten to derail a servant leader. But it doesn't just list them. It shows how they cascade into one another.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly. The causal chain begins with pride, moves into burnout, and ultimately ends in control.
Let's break down that pipeline. It starts with pride. And this usually isn't like cartoonish arrogance, right?
No, it's subtle.
Yeah, it's a gradual shift where a leader starts seeking the accolades. You want the applause. You want the recognition. You start believing your own press clippings.
Right. And slowly, your vision drifts from serving the mission of the organization to serving your own ego, often disguising it as, protecting the brand.
Oh, protecting the brand. That's such a common trap. And that pride leads directly into the second hazard burnout.
And the manuscript explains the mechanism here beautifully. When a leader becomes too proud to delegate because they believe no one else can do it as well as they can, they completely abandon the multiplication principle we just discussed.
They try to carry the entire emotional, spiritual, and operational load alone.
Exactly. They neglect rest, they skip prayer, and they eventually collapse under the weight of a burden that no single human being was ever designed to carry by themselves. Burnout is often just a physical manifestation of a leader refusing to share the load.
Which brings us to the final stage of the cascade. When you are exhausted and burning out, what is the natural human reaction?
You grip the steering wheel tighter.
You fall into control. The manuscript points out that micromanagement is almost always fueled by a fundamental lack of trust.
Yep. You don't trust your team to execute.
And on a deeper level, the text argues it reveals a lack of trust in God's sovereignty. You believe the entire universe rests on your shoulders, so you try to control every single variable.
It's an exhausting way to live.
So what does this all mean practically? If we are supposed to intentionally give up control, ruthlessly avoid pride, and just humbly serve the people around us, does that mean we abandon strategy and planning entirely?
Some people definitely think so.
Right. Does servant leadership mean you just show up to work with a towel and a basin, hope for the best, and completely ignore organizational logistics?
Not at all. That is a very common misconception that the text firmly corrects. Strategy and servanthood are not mutually exclusive. They are complementary.
Okay, how so?
Well, the manuscript actually outlines a highly specific strategic path for servant leaders. It insists that leadership must begin with prayerful discernment, which then informs the casting of a clear vision.
And then that vision requires team collaboration to figure out the logistics.
Exactly, which leads to faithful implementation and finally, rigorous reflection on the outcomes.
So there is a very robust, structured framework. It isn't just unstructured empathy.
It is highly structured.
Hmm.
But the key differentiator, the thing that separates a managerial strategist from a servant leader, is what the text calls execution with flexibility.
Execution with flexibility.
Right. A managerial leader clings rigidly to the strategic plan, no matter what happens to the people involved. If the plan hurts people, well, the people are just collateral damage for the sake of the goal.
Wow.
But a servant leader understands that rigid plans must constantly yield to reality. The text argues that true stewardship means adapting your strategy to serve the actual breathing human being standing in front of you rather than forcing those people to serve your strategy.
You adapt the plan to serve the people. That is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is.
It takes the crippling pressure off the leader to be a flawless architect of the future and puts the focus back on being deeply present with your team in the moment.
Yeah, you don't have to predict everything perfectly.
It requires the humility to look at a carefully crafted spreadsheet and say, you know what, this was our strategy and it was a good one, but the needs of the community have suddenly changed, so we are going to pivot and meet them where they are.
And that adaptability is the hallmark of wise, servant-hearted leadership. It proves that the leader loves the people more than they love their own strategic brilliance.
That is so powerful. As we wrap up this deep dive, the core realization of this entire manuscript really comes into sharp focus. We live in a world that constantly bombards us with the message that success means climbing higher, shouting louder, and consolidating as much power as possible.
Yep, the Roman model is still alive and well.
It really is.
Yep.
But the manuscript frames this countercultural model not just as a leadership tactic, but as an act of worship. It argues that the path upward in this framework always begins by kneeling.
Always.
Your greatness simply isn't measured by how many people you can compel to serve you. It is measured by how deeply, how sacrificially, and how consistently you are willing to serve others.
And that leaves us with a fascinating, almost unsettling paradox to mull over.
Oh, lay it on us.
Well, if the ultimate driving goal of a servant leader is to empower, mentor, and multiply others so successfully that the original leader's direct intervention is no longer required.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Then the truest mark of leadership success is actually making yourself entirely obsolete. If you do your job perfectly, you literally work yourself out of a job. How does that reality change the way you view your own ambition today?
That is a thought that will definitely stick with you. If you truly succeed, your presence isn't mandatory anymore because your team is fully equipped.
It changes everything.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you step back into your own life, your own workplace, your own community, take a hard look around and find your own way to pick up the towel. Keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.